everyone, and welcome to another episode of Growing Kentucky's Leaders. I'm one of your hosts, Sheldon McKinney.
And I'm your other host, Ruth Ann Fink.
And today we have our friend, Kirby Green. Kirby, when I was thinking about how I can introduce you, I kind of felt a little bit puzzled about it because I could introduce you as a Kentucky FFA alum, a past state FFA president. I could introduce you as a foundation board member or the national sales manager for Mutiny Ag. I could introduce you as a podcaster with your podcast for professional development called Sharpen. You have been a mentor to so many, and you wear a lot of hats. Most importantly, you are a farm girl from Breckenridge County, a wife to Tyler, and the mom to 3 beautiful green girls. So I think let's start at the beginning, and I'm going to let you introduce yourself to our audience and maybe share how Kentucky FFA became a part of your story.
Oh, I love it. Thank you all for having me on this podcast. And as you all know from day one, I'm a huge fan of your podcast, but not just for podcast sake. It's the work that you guys and all of the ag teachers and all of the state staff do across the state of Kentucky. It is life-changing. And I know that a lot of FFA members, we just say that, right? Because we know it's changed our lives. And for some people, they might be like, yeah. And it's like, no. This is life-changing work that Kentucky FFA does. So, yep, you mentioned it in the beginning. I'm a farm kid from Breckenridge County, Kentucky. My dad farms, my brother farms. It's in my DNA through and through. But it certainly was my choice. And so it's both, both my roots, but then also just my passion in life is working in agriculture. So after, growing up in my family farm, I knew our FFA chapter locally was active in the community and competitive. And I knew that that's where, there were some people like myself that were farm kids, and then there were other people that were not. But it was this collective group that you just as a young person admired them, right? Like they were a fun 16, 17, 18-year-old. At the same time, they just seemed to have that different edge about them. And I remember that as a young person thinking, I want to be an FFA. When I get to high school, I want to be an FFA. And met some of my closest friends through FFA, both there locally and across the state, across the nation. But as you all, when you put this date on our calendars for this interview, I was like, okay, we say all the time FFA is life-changing, right? And I got to thinking, I'm like, oh my gosh, the first time I traveled across the state of Kentucky, FFA. The only reason I know people in all 120 counties, FFA. Mm-hmm. The first time I got on the airplane to Washington, D.C. at that, FFA. The first time I left the country, FFA. And so you think of all these things that change your life and the trajectory of it. And those are the experiences. It's the people. It's the people that mentor you in ways. I'm looking at two of you. You two are like greatest life mentors to me. And so it is really, really neat to look back. And then for me as a member of the board, and you mentioned that, to look forward. So I went to Murray State, got my undergrad and my master's in ag. I taught high school agriculture. Loved my time in the classroom. I knew I would make a shift into agribusiness eventually. I've been in ag sales, working with farmers for about 12 years now. And yes, as you mentioned, just took a new role for Mutiny Crop Performance as the national sales manager. So, the coolest thing though is I'll be at a farm in the middle of wherever, in whatever state. And somehow it seems like those FFA connections bring us together in ways that you just can't explain. There's an understanding about who you are. Because I think as much as I told you, like as that young child, I saw the successful nature of those young people. What you learn in FFA, and maybe you don't see it in the time, is it's not just about what you're doing, which we know those doing things are super important. It's who you're becoming. And we can look back now, right, in this stage of life and be like, holy cow, it was trajectory changing to me because of who I became, because of the people and those experiences. So I'm really excited to talk to you all today. And I think everybody listening to this podcast should know that these two ladies on the call are two awesome mentors. So y'all are lucky. This is like free career counseling and life counseling. Every week, brought to you by Sheldon.
That's right. That's right. We
Well,
love it.
Kirby, you mentioned so many great things about your background, and I hope our listeners really took away that you care so much about agriculture and its industry and the people that are in it. And that's been a true cornerstone of your career ever since graduating from Murray State, really. I mean, even through your time in FFA, but you've carried that with you and you've done it well. So why don't you tell our listeners more detail? Because we're going to talk more about like how your career has shaped you and different things in that nature. But tell us in detail, like what do you do? And why do you love it?
Yeah. So, and Ruthie, and I think if you would have asked me, which we knew each other at this stage in life, so you can probably remember it's that like if you would have asked me 10 years ago, if you would have asked me 20 years ago, if I'd be doing what I am now, I would have said, heck no, right? I didn't know these things existed. So, I've always known I've had a love for agriculture, for farming. I've always known I've had a love for people, just super curious about them and what they're interested in and how I can help support them. I always knew that I enjoyed ag across the US. And so it's really neat now to know that those things were true 20, 30 years ago, right? And to see them evolve into a career, into work. And so I hope that the FFA members or whomever is listening, I would say take note of those things. Like what really, and I don't like the, oh, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life statement. Because I don't think that's true at all. I think sometimes it is hard and work and gritty. At the same time, take note of those things that are just your interest and what you're good at and what you get really fired up about. When all of that can intersect, it's this beautiful thing that you get to do in your career. So what I do now, it's a great question. So I am serving as the national sales manager for Mutiny Crop Performance. We are a soil biology company. We work with farmers to optimize for yield, all things that are my passion. When farmers are successful, when our dealers, so the people who partner with us to represent our products in their local communities, when they're successful, number one, the farms are successful. We three know on this call, when farmers are successful, who else is successful? You all tell me.
Yeah, everyone. It's trickle
Local
down.
Everyone.
businesses,
Yeah.
yeah. FFA, because we're more philanthropic, all kinds of things. Yeah.
It's this domino effect. It's like, and that is just the coolest part about my job because I know that, right? Whenever the farmers that we work with and get to partner with are successful, then it seems like there's just this huge ripple effect in their communities, in their families, in their business, and their sphere of influence, and so on and so forth. And so, people always talk about like your why, what you do. Yes, I'm a farm kid at heart. But maybe more importantly, getting to see that across the US, and it's just the best part. So I work with our founders, I work with our sales reps, and prior to that, had a wonderful career between Monsanto and Bayer in the commercial organization, also working with farmers across the United States. And so I've spent some time in the seed business. I've spent some time in seed and chemistry and digital. And so here's what I would say to FFA members. I'm saying those things now. You can ask, and I'll have to send this podcast episode. So one of the very first salesmen that I worked with in Northeast Indiana, I would joke, my last name's Green. And I'm like, and I'm also the epitome. I'm green as a gourd, right? Because I had never seen these massive planters and all these things, like whenever I first started in the industry, I didn't know what I didn't know, which was a lot. And so if you're listening to this, don't just only base where you're going next on just I currently am good at this, or I know about this. Those that find success, I believe, are those that are lifelong learners, because that's agriculture. We are constantly changing. And so people who are like, nope, this is the way we've always done it. Nope, I've got it figured out. Nope, I'm never wrong. If those are big red flags, right? So stay curious, stay humble, be confident in what you are good at, but be a lifelong learner, because the ag environment, the farming technology 5 years from now, totally different. It's going to look different. Now the cores will be true, the core aspects of what we do. So that's been the cool part of my career, is that I think just that commitment to lifelong learning has really served me well in opportunities, because, we know that we don't have it figured out.
Yeah. That's wonderful. You are a lifelong learner, and you have made some career transitions that I think are pretty neat for our students to hear about. Why don't you tell us what your major was in college? You mentioned it before, but why you thought Ag Ed was a great place to begin your career, and kind of what skills you learned from that helped you take the bend in the road and do something different.
Yeah, I love that you asked about starting out. So my undergrad ag ed, my master's general agriculture, but heavy emphasis in ag education. And as I mentioned before, I started out as a high school ag teacher at the time, Lone Oak High School in Paducah. It's now McCracken County High School. All the high schools came together and had just an incredible experience. Alex, if you listen to this podcast, we were just talking about you and how wonderful you are. Alex was one of my first students. Alex became a state FFA officer. She was a national finalist in the job interview. She's done all crazy, cool, amazing things. And now, and all of all the moving parts of life, we live in the same town that neither one of us grew up in. And so just a really beautiful thing when all the pieces come together in ways you wouldn't imagine. But if you're listening and you're thinking, gosh, I would love to have a career in agriculture, I don't know where to start because I'm interested in all of it. I'm super curious. I think Ag Ed is an amazing place. And I have told people over when I first started in ag sales, agribusiness, I thought, oh man, like maybe I should have majored in agronomy, right? That would have served me well. And what I began to see is the ag ed experience is pretty special because of both the soft skills and the hard skills that you learn. So hard skills, you're exposed to a variety of ag topics. I took ag welding. I remember, Ruthie, and I know you were in a sorority. I would see my sorority sisters on Murray State's campus, and I had my welding mark on my forehead from being in welding class. And they were like, only you, Kirby, has this line from going to welding class. And I'm like, heck yeah. I took horticulture and worked in the greenhouses. I did agribusiness. I did plant science. I did soil science. I took the whole gamut of ag classes. And I love that because it exposed me to so many different areas with a goal of being able to equip me to be able to teach that in the classroom. What I saw is like, oh my goodness, all of these points of diversity in ag had me pretty well rounded, because as you know, ag across the US is pretty diverse. So that was just from a technical hard skill set, being able to have a wide exposure. But here's probably the secret sauce of ag ed. It's in that soft skill development. It's in the communication. When you're an ag teacher, when you're in training to be an ag teacher, you have a variety of stakeholders. You have students, you have parents, you have your administration at the school, you have awesome resources like the FFA Foundation and your alumni, you have industry leaders. You learn to network and grow and learn with a lot of people, including your students, right? Including your students. And so I think that learning that soft skill set, even though I wasn't thinking about that at the time, right? You sign up for your classes, but you're being molded across a variety of skill sets that you don't even know. Like I remember if I would go to a meeting, the level of preparation you do for a lesson as an ag teacher, is it in line with your objectives? Like, what are they going to get? How am I going to reach multiple ways of learning? Visual, auditory, kinesthetic, right? Like you think through those things. And I remember I would ask, I would think sometimes about those things, and people, I thought they were probably like, what in the world? Just the level of preparation that I was trained to go into meetings for. And so those are just a few examples. So if you're questioning a major, without a doubt, I can say ag ed is a fantastic major. You might go that route and be an ag teacher for 45 years. You may become an ag teacher for 10 years. You may become an ag teacher for 20 years. You may want to become the high school principal. I don't know. And by the way, this is something that I've talked about on my podcast. Sometimes there's a lot of pressure, especially for your listener group, especially for people in our age demographic, of like that whole "what do you want to be when you grow up" thing. If I could go back in time and tell my younger FFA self something, it would be, people talk about setting goals, like strategy, right? And being super intentional with it. That is great. That is fantastic. There's also this very beautiful thing about emerging goals, emerging strategy, which means that I say yes to really cool opportunities with really good people. And I see things come about that I never would have thought about, right? They emerge, and it's not like they just pop. It's a byproduct of high character and hard work ethic and all those things. But that's what my career has been, right? I thought I was going to be an ag teacher forever. This opportunity emerged. I thought I was going to be, in this territory forever, in the seed business. This other opportunity emerged. What I'm doing today, it emerged. And so be open to also really cool opportunities. Set your goals, have a plan, but be open for a pivot, because you never know what's around the corner.
Well, it's great advice for any season that you were in, because you're right. It's constantly evolving and emerging. I love that word. Well, Kirby, you have mentioned mentorship a few times, and I want to talk about mentorship. We have a special relationship. I'm so lucky that I have Kirby as a personal mentor for a long time, and friend, mentor. I feel like there's so many words to describe there. And you've just made that a priority in a lot of ways and in a lot of different circles. Anywhere from a book club to just check-in phone calls, but you make it a big priority. And I know for myself, like I found myself in roles here recently as I've gotten older I feel equipped to be a mentor myself because of your mentorship. And that's really special. That's quite a legacy to leave with so many different folks. So I just wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about mentorship and how it's helped you grow as a person.
Ruth Ann, you could say nothing, but I think we're done with the interview after that. I'm done. I'm going home for the day. I'm gonna go get a book.
I would be remiss if I did not mention how great of a mentor you've been to me and so many of my friends and colleagues too. Like, it's not just me. It's a real priority for you.
Well, you're so kind. Thank you for sharing all of that. And I think that I think about being that young person in Breckenridge County, being that first time college student in Murray State, being a person that moved to Noblesville, Indiana, and didn't know anybody, moving to Owensboro, not really know anybody, being the new kid, being the not experienced person, right? There were so many people that said, hey, how can I help you? Hey, I'd love to. Or they might have even thought of something I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that was a possibility. And so my life has been the byproduct of so many different mentors. And you two are amongst many of those. And so a couple of thoughts around mentorship. Number one, don't wait to arrive before you start investing in people, because you won't, because you shouldn't. That is the sign of a lifelong learner who's humble. So I remember thinking like, oh, there's this like awesome group of these FFA gals that I know, like yourself, and I'd love to have this group, but like, I'm not anybody, or I'm not this business owner, CEO, whatever, fill in the blank. And what we learned, I think, Ruth Ann, is all of us being in somewhat similar stages, but in different stages. But then like that is how our group just clicked, right? It wasn't about being arrived. So number one, if you're listening to this and you're in high school classroom or middle school classroom, you are a mentor who is coming in behind you. And oftentimes we think of age, but sometimes it's people like don't even think about age. Sometimes it's, I remember at a couple points in my career, specifically for young women in ag, there might be something I was like, if I could tweak this, if I could change this, if I could mold this, this is what I would do. Make it better for the people that come behind you. And we have that ability as FFA members, right? So that mentorship is not, you don't have to make it something fancier than it's not. It's how do I invest in people around me, particularly people coming in behind me. And I think of Sheldon, this was another one of those, I think you had shared Life Counsel by Laura Tremaine. that book. I think, was it you that had shared that with? I love that book so much because it talked about the importance of having a life counsel. And it talked about it's people maybe older than you by age, it's people younger than you, it's people like it's peers, it's a variety of people that make your life counsel. And I think that's what good membership is. And just be looking for people that, sometimes here's the other thing too that I think is really special about ag is that the networking opportunities for us to gather together are pretty frequent, sometimes in other industries. And so I love to see like who are people that I can't see all the time in person, right? We love virtual options, but we have those moments where we do get together in person because that's really special. So FFA members, you are mentors. You are mentors, hear that, and find ways to invest in someone. If you're a high school senior, and you told a high school freshman, maybe you're in a Bible study, maybe you're on the same sports team, maybe it's strictly FFA, how you know each other. Hey, I would love to help you XYZ. Is that something you would be open to? You will make their year because people do not, the reality is the world around us, that's not how everybody's operating. It tends to be about me, what's on my schedule, what's my plan, what do I have time for? And you can't be a mentor for the entire world population, right? Man, if you find one person that you invest in and do so really intentionally, it will change their life.
Yeah, it definitely will. It really will. I am so grateful for mentors in my life and in all kinds of different realms. And you have to be intentional about it, though. You have to seek it out and you have to dole it out intentionally.
That's exactly
Talk about intention. Kirby, I think about you and the many things that you manage and juggle, and it looks like you do it seamlessly. I know it's not seamlessly. It is by choice and by design. But, we have high school students or maybe people who go like, I don't have time. I don't have time to do all of these things. How are you managing that? I look at you and I go, this is somebody who has mastered some time management skills. So what practical tips do you have about how you manage your time to make all these things a priority? And then maybe also, why do you make Kentucky FFA one of them event?
Well, I love that. I love that question, the last question there. So time management. So I think in my, whenever you're high school to college to fresh out of college, young career and all of that, you're in a different stage than where I am now. So there's like a couple different messages. I love that there's been a shift in conversation, whether it's on Instagram or great books that are being written or podcast episodes about boundaries and margin and time management. That is so good. Ruth Ann, we read the book Essentialism, right, as a group. So good. I think that's a really, really great thing that we have recognized. Oh, people have bandwidth and it's not, unlimited. And that there should be at some point boundaries as far as when we put these daggum phones down or whatever it is. At the same time, I feel like it's sometimes skewed the perception of opportunities to young people. And so whenever you're a high school student, a college student, you tend to have more time and more energy. So I would say yes to as much that you reasonably can. And I remember whenever I was in high school and college, I did that probably to an extreme. There were probably some things I'm like, I don't know why I said yes to that thing. I wasn't even interested in it. I don't know why, but things that are interesting and have great people, say yes, because you're going to create relationships. You're going to learn skill sets. You're going to learn an industry, whatever it is, you're going to learn something and get something from it. And so say yes, because going back to those emerging things, how are you supposed to know what you're good at and what you like and where your passion lies if you don't say yes to a lot of things? I would say that I did that, and I'm really, really glad in that stage of life that I did. What I learned, especially after becoming a mom, and now I'm a mom of 3 girls. My youngest is a child with special needs who needs a lot from us, and we are glad to give it to her. So what I've learned, and then I mentioned my career roles, right? So I learned, okay, I've said yes to a lot of things. This is a different season of life. And so how do I say yes and in big ways to the things that mattered most? And so it's been a constant filtering down. And by the way, saying no to something is not saying that that's a bad thing. Here's another thing I've learned is I think about my time whenever I was at Bayer. We had a organization called Grow in the Field, which is for women in the field. And I loved being a part of that organization. When they started, I was one of the few women in a field role. And so just by natural order, I became one of the leaders in the organization. What I began to learn the past few years is I'm really passionate for this thing. This doesn't mean that I still lead in this particular way. I need to say no so that the next person behind me, I can get out of their way, right? There's a passing of the torch. And so there's just a lot of lessons like that, and saying it doesn't mean that I'm saying no to it. It's saying either not now. That's one of the responses, or I love this. This is someone else's, and I can help support in a different way. And so that's been evolving. You all know me. I tend to be a yes person, and I had to tell myself, Kirby, you're still a yes person. You're just learning yes with a capital Y, because I said yes with a little lowercase y to everything for so long. So then let me talk practically, because this is where I learn. So what that looks like for me is, once a month I have time set aside and I look at my next month, right? And that's sometimes just tactical, like planning and does this make sense and all of this, just so I'm managing my time well. Once a quarter, I set out areas, 7 different areas, one day of the week, of life, right? One of them's family. One of them's physical health. One of them's spiritual. One of them's career, right? And I have specific quarterly goals or focus areas for that quarter. And what that lets me do is throughout that next quarter, I have one day a week where I say, okay, how am I tracking in this? Is this still my goal? Because sometimes it's not. I'm like, I thought that is what I need to be focused on, but this other thing came about. So I do that quarterly and I know what I'm focused on. And then once a year, and Ruth Ann, we've done some of this together as an edge group. I take time away to take a broader look. I think sometimes we overestimate what we can get done in a year, but we severely underestimate what we can get done in like 3 to 5 to 10 years. So I try to be intentional about the time that I have to think through what are those big yeses with a capital Y. And by the way, I am still learning on how to get better at that, right? Because it's usually, here's what I've learned. Usually in the world of extremes, the answer is somewhere in the middle. So boundaries are important. And saying yes to a lot of really fun, interesting things is important. How can I be like somewhere in the middle of that? Because I don't want to happen is I get overly routined of everything I just talked about, and I'm clearly missing the opportunity right in front of me. So I want to keep that flavor from my 20s with hopefully some wisdom from my 30s of you can't say yes.
Amen. That's good stuff.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And I think you can do that well because you know what's important to you. And so for people maybe like starting out, just identifying what's really important to you is helpful of knowing where to put your time. And that comes so effortlessly because you have stood very strong in those values, what's important to you. And we're so glad Kentucky FFA is one of those things because you are such a leader with our own organization and we couldn't do it without you, Kirby.
And I don't think I answered that question. You were like, why is Kentucky FFA?
Yeah, tell us.
Well, I just gave you my story, right? Like I know Kentucky FFA changes lives. It changes the trajectory of lives. And there's a lot of great organizations that do that for sure. When something is so weaved into your own story, and even to this day, Kentucky FFA, National FFA, still changing my life today, that's the sign of a special organization. So it's a very easy yes, and you all make it fantastic to be a part of.
Well, anyone who's worked with you know it's just such a pleasure, and we're better because of your leadership. And we have a great board of lots of great leaders, and so glad that you are a part of that, and we get to look to you. We end every episode with the same 3 questions. You know this as a listener, and it's really fun to hear what people have to say. And you've already answered a few, so we may have to change them up a bit. But the first one is just, what's the best piece of leadership advice that you've ever received and would like to share out?
I love this one. And Doug Wilson, if you're listening, I think you said this, but then I also know that there was a Peachtree Leadership, Jonelle, that we talked about it. So it's like one of those really good nuggets of wisdom. You're like, it's like a hybrid version. A lot of people have said this. This is not mine. But I love that in essence, you should be about growing good fruit on other people's tree. And when I think about leadership, that is leadership. Leadership is not sometimes what LinkedIn articles portray it to be, or the Harvard Business Review, or sometimes we think of leadership, they're the person in charge and on top, or whatever it is. No, leadership is about growing good fruit on other people's tree. And I love that metaphor because, of course, it's agricultural in essence. But what it implies is good fruit. There's different kinds of fruit that's good fruit. And so how do we not only become a mentor, a leader in someone's life, not only that they're doing the right things, but becoming the right things? And then it's really servant leadership, right? It's flipped upside down of that. I always think of when I said the peach tree leadership analogy, good leaders tend to be the roots. So sometimes you don't see them, you don't see what they're doing. It's servant leadership. The fruit is who you're supporting. And by the way, sometimes all three of us have been that fruit that other people have been tending to and growing, but it's active. It's work. It's good work. And so I just love that whenever I hear people talk about, what leadership is, and especially in election year, oh my gosh, right? I'm like, dang it, if we could all agree that leadership is about growing good fruit on other people's tree, I just think we would be it shifts your mindset around what leadership is.
That's right. The fruits of the spirit and so many things. It's test the fruit. You have good fruit. Well, we also make time to shout out to somebody who's poured into us. You've poured into so many people. Me and Ruth Ann and I are included in that stack. But who would you like to shout out today as somebody who's been pivotal in growing you in your journey?
Like whenever people win like a big award on stage and they're like, I want to thank my mom and my dad and my kids and my dog and my producer. And like when you asked me that, whenever you all put that, I was like, okay, I'm going to have I want to thank, because I don't want to leave anybody out. Okay, I have to give a few. I have to thank my ag teachers from Breckenridge County High School for giving me so many opportunities. She was not my ag teacher, but she was my guidance counselor, Debbie Muse, who became many people's ag teacher. She drove the bus that took me on my first college visit to Murray State. She gave me a big hug when I got my scholarship to Murray State University. She was the first one to find out, along with my ag teachers. I think about so many mentors that I've had in my career. My past manager, his name's Joe Walsh. Brad Wilson is a manager I've had before that gave me an opportunity that I've joked like, I really tricked him. He probably shouldn't give me the opportunity. I wasn't qualified. Same for a boss that I've had, Kent Harris. I mean, just people that gave me an opportunity, but didn't just give it, coach me, believed in me, championed me. But that's in the work and the ag world. My parents who worked tirelessly to give me those opportunities. I think about probably most importantly, my husband, Tyler, who whenever I've said, I want to start a podcast, can we move to Northeast Indiana? Can we, Ruth Ann, I'm like, I want to have a half marathon 10K. And he's like, it's sure, Kirby, let's do it. Just the support, not only of words of support, but also the actual practical support that he, and then I have to, as a mom, as a girl mom, my 3 little girls, Cora, Caroline, Charlie, they're the best. They're the best things ever. They're so fun. They're so different, and they're so wonderful. So I did a terrible job of the Oscar acceptance speech, but there's too many people.
Right.
Yeah, that's great.
It's a good problem to have too many people you need to shout out because they're so important to you. That's great.
I know.
And it's all worthy.
Mm-hmm.
Our last question is a fun one. I actually am really looking forward to hearing what you have to say here, Kirby, but what is just something you're loving right now that's helping you grow and develop as a leader?
Okay, this one's really ridiculous. I know your guests have given you amazing things, so this is really going to probably disappoint people.
No.
All right, I'm a reader. I love podcasts. I'm relaunching my podcast, Sharpen. That's why I'm in the studio today, because I'm going to relaunch Sharpen 2.0. So Sharpen's still in existence. Sharpen the podcast for young professionals. You can still listen to it. I love Tyler and I share an Audible account. I wear that out with so I'm always listening and learning. Here's my little tip. I have now become really focused and fascinated on listening to comedy, especially when I'm driving down the road. All right. Because
Okay.
I'm like listening to all these leadership books and agricultural podcasts and calling people back on the phone. And it's, it's good. It's always about progress and focus and work and intentionality and mentorship. Da, 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 da. Sometimes it's nice to listen, have a little levity in the day and to listen to comedy. So Ruth Ann, I told you that about a year or so ago. Like, I need some comedy in my life throughout the day. And you told me about Nate Bargatze. He's
Yes, the
my favorite.
best. He's the
Leanne
best.
Morgan, she is a hoot. And when she said her hometown, so a guy I worked with knows her family. So I was like, oh my gosh. So if you have good, clean, fun comedy that I can listen to driving down the road or working out, I like, you all know I love to run. So I'll be on my long runs and listening to a comedian, and I'm just having a great time laughing to myself.
Yeah.
Here's the lesson, and you can roll your eyes of course you had to turn it into a leadership lesson. I think there's just really something to creating an environment of fun wherever you are, of being likable and fun. That's going to get you really, really far in life, because we do need hard skills and soft skills and all the things I've talked about today. But man, having some levity and likability and all those things that comedians do, they take what matters seriously, but they don't take themselves too seriously. And I've just learned, I feel so much from just listening to comedy, even and I joked, I think with our group, Ruth Ann, I was like I'll get out at work meetings, and I was instead of being laser focused on something I just learned about in robotics and ag, I'm going to be hey, I just feel so fun and lighthearted. And I was I need to get a little bit more focused, but listening to comedy. So those are two people, and I'd love suggestions from your listeners of fun comedy.
No, those are great. I have seen both of those comedians live, and I actually made my mom and my aunt sit down and watch Leanne Morgan live because they loved it. And then they showed her at their Bible study class. And some ladies didn't like it, but they should have, because it is so funny. I
Yeah,
think,
listen, on clean comedy, really good ones, vetted people that we just named, I'm also listen, if you cannot enjoy them, you need a little shakeup in your life.
sure.
Nate is so talented. He's my favorite.
Yeah. So Kirby, I saw a post on social media earlier today, and it said, I think adults underestimate how responsible we are for creating our own joy. And it said, plan the exciting dinner, host the 10K birthday party, save the special comedy for your long run, but creating things in our life that bring us joy. And you do that so intentionally, and you do it so well for other people. And so when I think about you, I just think of, you are intentional about your time and your effort, and it truly matters. And so you've inspired a lot of folks. We are so glad to have you on our circle of influence as a board of trustee for the FFA Foundation, and a leader at that. And I'm so glad that you're our friend, and that you also get to just impart this wisdom on Kentucky FFA members and folks listening. So thanks for being with us today.
Oh my gosh, I need to have every Monday a lunch hour with you all. I'm ready to go. You all have me jazzed up. No, thank you all for having me. This is the best podcast. Love what y'all are doing.
Well, we will link your podcast in our notes. So if people are interested in podcasts, they want to hear more about you, they can listen in. And just thanks for being with us. Okay, y'all, thanks for listening to this episode of Growing Kentucky's Leaders. Growing Kentucky's Leaders is a podcast brought to you by the Kentucky FFA Foundation. Our music is performed by Bourbon County FFA member Joe Fritch. Artwork is by Julie Fritch Creative. Your hosts are Sheldon McKinney and Ruth Ann Fink, and you can find us on all social platforms at Kentucky FFA.